Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to continue hearing evidence from Mr. Gregorian at this point. Mr. Gregorian, are you there and can you hear me and see me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Are you ready to carry on?
Yep.
Good. Then in that case, I'll invite Mr. Millett to put some more questions to you. Yes, we're ready, Mr. Millett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Before I continue my questions, there's something I just ought to make clear to those watching, and that is Mr. Haynes. As we understand it, Mr. Haynes was very seriously ill in the months leading up to the end of last year and sadly passed away in the last few months. And so has been unable to come to give evidence to the inquiry. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that clarifies any questions that people might have about why Mr. Haynes is not able to.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I think it is helpful to know that.
Can we now, Mr. Gregorian, can we now go to your witness statement at page 6, please? I'd like to look at inquiry question 14 on that page. And in doing this, I'm picking up from where we left off before the lunch break. You can see there that the question 14 is, did you consider the field of application of the products certified in certificate 08/4510? And your answer is at paragraph 33, and you say the fields of application considered would have been those in the CSTB certificate and as set out in the application form. Is it your evidence, so that we're clear, that you did consider the field of application set out in classification 5A that we've seen?
Well, the CSTB would define what the field of application was, and as members of UATC, that the CSTB's definition were acceptable to BBA.
Yes, I mean, the question is, did you consider the field of application? And your answer in your statement is the fields of application considered would have been those in the CSTB certificate. My question is, did you actually consider, did you actually think about the field of application of the product as set out?
I must have thought about, yes.
Yes. The reason I ask is because the BBA certificate doesn't say anything about the European result B being limited to rivet form, does it?
No, because as I've mentioned before, the fixing method was considered irrelevant because we were assessing the panel material.
Yes, and you told us that, but just to be clear, you agree, I think, that the certificate also doesn't say that a reader of it should check the field of application with Arconic, does it?
No, I can't remember a statement such as that. No.
Do you know why it doesn't?
We have just followed the format of the certificate, and I'm not sure if that would have been bearing in mind, I say it's the material we're considering. I'm not sure if the application would be relevant. It's just a comment. I'm just saying that the BBA certificate had a certain format, and I'm just assuming that field of application was not meant to be in the certificate. I can't comment on that beyond that.
How would a reader of this certificate know that the European Class B was relevant only to the rivet fix of the product?
I think we do say somewhere in the certificate that it's got to be, the whole certificate has got to be read in entirety. So whoever was looking at that should have had some knowledge as to how, technical knowledge as to how the product could be used. I think that's the impression we do try and get in the BBA certificate.
There's nothing in the certificate which tells us that the Class B fire classification stated in it relates only to Rainabon 55 in rivet fix.
No.
So my question is, how would a reader know that?
Again, it's the material, the panel material we were considering, and the method of fixing was considered irrelevant. So they could, based on the details given in the certificate, they could fabricate a particular panel size, and providing all the criteria were met, they would install.
Well, can we go back to the certificate then, please, at BBA 6047, page 5. Look at paragraph or section 6.1 on that page. It says a standard sample of the product, etc., achieved a classification of BS2D0. How would anybody reading that section know that it was only a standard sample of the product in rivet form, as opposed to in cassette form, that had achieved that classification?
No, again, as soon as you mention a fixing method, people would assume that you can only use that particular panel in a rivet form. But as I say, the fixing method was considered irrelevant because we were assessing the panel material.
Go back to page 3 then, please. Look at paragraph 1.1. Look at the second line. The panels are available either plain edge riveted system or flanged cassette system to suit architectural requirements. See figure 1. If the difference between riveted system and cassette system was irrelevant, and you were only certifying the raw panel, what was the point of inserting that sentence and going to the trouble of inserting figure 1?
That's just an example. It's meant to be an example of what panels are currently available. There's, you could choose, a consulting engineer could choose any dimension, any panel size, and this is just meant to be an example of what was available.
Why was the certificate telling the reader by example what was available?
I think that must have been the standard format of the certificate. I really wouldn't know. I mean, again, it's a format that the BBA had adopted for a long time for panels such as this.
Why does the certificate not tell the reader that in either of these systems as fabricated, the fabricated panel falls outside the scope of the certificate?
I think there is some reference to this. Isn't there somewhere in the perhaps the back page of the certificate? I seem to remember there's something to say that it's just the panel material we're assessing, especially with regard to fire.
Well, take it from me that there's nothing in this certificate which tells the reader that the fabricated systems, fabricated for rivet or fabricated for cassette, fall outside the scope of the certificate? My question is, why is that, if it was irrelevant?
I can't answer that.
If you look down at paragraph 1.4, you can see there's a footnote relating to the subframe, which is very clearly identified as not covered by this certificate. If you were intending to exclude from the cover of this certificate the riveted system and the cassette system as identified in figure 1, why didn't you make it clear as you had with the subframe?
With hindsight, we could have amplified that aspect a bit more clearly in the certificate.
Going back to paragraph 6.1, please, on page 5. Looking at 6.1, when it says the standard sample of the product, when tested for reaction to fire, achieved a classification of BS2D0, do you accept that a reader of that sentence would be led to think that what had achieved a classification of BS2D0 was the product in both rivet and cassette fabrications?
In this particular section, we just state facts. This particular panel was tested to this, and that's all that's saying. There's no reference to the fixing method at all. So if I were reading this, I would take it as that is how the material behaves in fire.
What material, Mr. Gregorian?
The material tested.
What was tested was the material in a rivet form, wasn't it?
No, I think, as far as I remember, a sample has been tested. There's no reference to whether it was fixed or whether it was rivet fixed or cassette fixed. So again, I have to emphasize, I don't know much about fire. So very little. I know very little about fire. So I can't constructively comment as to why this particular statement appears as it is. But I'm quite sure that the product we were assessing had nothing to do with the fixing method. It was just basically making sure that the panel was suitable for inclusion in a cladding system.
The product you were assessing, you say, had nothing to do with the fixing method. If that's the case, can you explain what figure 1 is doing in the certificate?
Again, it was normal practice for some details to be included. You had to give the certificate holder some indication of his product, how he was going to use it. And that was one way of doing it. We always included some detail, irrespective of whether they're covered by the certificate, irrespective of whether, yes, they were covered by the certificate or not. I think we do make it clear in the certificate that what is covered.
Do you accept that the reader of this certificate, when seeing the words "a standard sample of the product," would think that both rivet and cassette versions were covered by the classification BS2D0?
If I were reading this, that's the conclusion I would have come to.
And do you accept that that was a wrong conclusion?
No, I think in the context of the assessment subject, which was the actual panel material, I would assume that the fixing method was irrelevant. That's what I would conclude from reading that statement.
Do you accept, I'll try this one more time, do you accept as a matter of fact that when a reader is told that a standard sample of the product achieved a classification of BS2D0 in circumstances where it was only the riveted version of that product which had achieved that standard, the reader would be misled?
This statement points to a sample. It actually refers to a sample. The sample could be any suitable dimension for the test facility. So again, the way I would read this is it's irrelevant how it's fixed to the substructure. That's how I would interpret it.
You see, given that the test itself, the classification BS2D0, was only on the rivet fixed, you accept the reader would not realize that and might be misled into thinking that it applied to both fixes.
He would be right to assume that it would apply to both fixing types. He wouldn't be wrong, but as I say, if I were reading this, I wouldn't take notice of how the panels were fixed to the substructure.
Well, with great respect, Mr. Gregorian, he would be wrong, because as I've shown you, the classification of B was only achieved on the rivet form and not the cassette form.
That's true, but as far as our assessment was concerned, it was considered irrelevant.
Can we then look at 6.2, fire retardant sample of the product? I've shown you, I've read that to you. Can we have at the same time on the screen technical file page 155, BBA 408042? This is the classification report from the CSTB in relation to the FR product.
Yeah.
Which was on the file. And you can see that the date of that is October the 19th, 2006. And you can see from the middle of the page that it relates to Reynobond FR. And if we go to page 157, in that document, keeping the left-hand side of the screen where it is, you can see that the product the description there in the third line down is tested system riveted on metal substructure. So you've got the FR on rivet. And if you go to the final page of this report, page 161, you can see the classification BS1D0. And again, underneath it, under field of application, paragraph 4.3, it tells you that the classification is valid for the following product parameters: thickness of 4 millimeters. And then underneath that, this classification is valid for the following end-use conditions: riveted system on metal substructure. Is this the test that is referred to in paragraph 6.2 of the certificate?
Yes, this is the CSTB data we would have received, and it would have been perfectly acceptable to the BBA.
I'm so sorry. I mean, I've taken you to 6.2. I mean 6.1, the second half of 6.1. I apologize. Where it says in 6.1, a fire retardant sample of the product with a gold-colored Duragloss finish achieved a classification of BS1D0. Am I right in thinking that it's the test on the right-hand side of the screen?
Yes.
Which is the basis of the claim for fire performance in that second sentence?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Now let's look and see how this document came to be on the technical file. I think I can take this quite shortly. Do you recall that this was requested by Mandy Osman in November 2007?
Yes, I know Mandy, work with her, yes.
Let's go to MET 3055859, please. I just traced the email through. This is an email, we can take both of those off the screen. Yes, this is an email, second email down from Mandy Osman to the BBA. We need to page 2, I'm sorry, page 2, second email down. You can see she writes to Claude Verley on the 22nd of November 2007 and she encloses a copy of the proposed certificate and asks for his written approval. She then says at the bottom, as this certificate is the first of a type to be put into the new format, we shall circulate the draft to the regulatory authorities and our technical assessors for their comments. You'll be sent a further copy then for your approval. And if you go up to the first email on this page, you can see it's a response from Claude Verlet to Mandy Osman and to you. And he says, hello, I got some remarks. This email, which is 23rd of November, has got some text in blue and red. The red is Claude Verlet's, and there are some comments in green. If we scroll up to the very bottom of page 1 in this email chain, we can see that it's at the very bottom of the page, we can see you say, same day, 23rd of November 2007, Claude, please see my response below in green. You see that? Mm-hmm. So can we take it that the green text on page 2 is yours?
Yes.
If we go back to the top of page 2 then, let's look at the email from Claude Verlet to which you have responded. You can see that on 1 it says description. Instead of a gloss duracoating, a PVDF coating, can you write a duragloss or PVDF coating protects the exposed face in many different colors to outside exposure? The exposed face is protected with a polyester primer. And you've added, is this right? You've added text will be amended as advised. Yes?
Yes.
And then on 1.3, Mr. Verlet writes, can you add the 2 dimensions 2000 times 3000 and 2000 times 4000? And again, you've said in response in green, text will be amended as advised. That's you again, is it?
Yeah.
And then on 6.1, he says, can you add the results of our fire certification for Reynobond FR BS1D0? Test report sent to Hamo some month ago. And then you say in green, I do not appear to have received this report, please resend. And then if we scroll up to the bottom of page 1, second email from the bottom, you can see there that in response to this email from you, with your green comments in it, Claude Verlet comes back to you and says, hello, Hamo, please find enclosed the document for our Reynobond FR certification. And if you look at the attachment, well, you can't see the attachment to that, but in fact, the attachment is the certificate of 2006 we've just been looking at for Rivet in FR. And at the top of page 1, second email down a little bit later the same day, you say, Claude, the report is fine. I'll add appropriate statement to section 6.1. Can we take it from the email run I've shown you that it was Claude Verlet who asked you specifically to include the European classification for FR cord Reynobond?
We would do that. We would have to do that. We need to put information in the certificate. So.
Yes, yes. He wants you to add the results. You say, I haven't had the report. He sends it to you and you tell him it's fine. I'm just asking you really to summarize that. And it's just to agree with me that it was Claude Verlet who asked you specifically to include that European classification for FR cord Reynobond.
Yes, I suppose so, yes.
We don't see that you asked him, having received the report he sends you, whether there was an equivalent test for FR cord Reynobond 55 in a cassette fix. Do you think you did ask him for that?
I can't remember.
It doesn't appear that you didn't. My question would be, on the basis that you didn't, why didn't you?
I can't answer. I can't answer that. I mean, I don't know the details. I can't remember what went on during our communication.
So far, sorry, do you want to?
No, sorry.
On you go, Mr. Millett.
Yes. So far, everything we've been looking at by way of reports from CSTB have been classification reports. We've seen test 5A for the PE rivet, and we've seen the 2006 test for FR in rivet. We've seen no underlying test data on which those classifications are based. Do I take it from that you never asked Arconic for the underlying test data?
I think our assessment was based on whatever information they supplied.
Did you realize that under the contract that Arconic had with the BBA, Arconic was obliged to send all relevant test data to you?
They must have done.
When you say they must have done?
I can't, I mean, for fire assessment, we would require documentation, and Arconic would have had to supply that. And our assessment would have been based on the BS 476, 477 test, and whatever other information CSTB or Arconic would provide.
Did you notice that you have? I'm sorry, I started asking my question, I think, before you finished your answer. Maybe not. Did you notice that although you had classification reports, Arconic had not provided you with the underlying test data on which those classification reports were based?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I can't quite
notice that you didn't have any underlying test data which supported the classification reports I've showed you.
I think there's a good chance the CSTB document, the Avitech League, would have had some information. And whether the Warrington fire test was done previous to that, I can't remember. I couldn't comment.
Specifically in relation to the test data underlying the classification reports for fire that we've seen, did you notice that Arconic had not sent you that underlying fire test data?
I suppose from the communication, I can only conclude that they hadn't. So I had to chase.
So can we take it that that you accepted, the BBA accepted the classification reports from the CSTB as the basis of your certification of Renabon 55 as having Euro Class B without looking at the underlying test data?
I think that's it's normal procedure actually between UATC members.
It's normal procedure, is it?
It is, yes, yes.
Now, as I've shown you, I think probably too many times, Mr. Gregorian, we've seen that both the European classification reports from the CSTB for Renabon 55 related to the fabrication in rivet fix. We know now that Arconic did another test on Renabon PE in cassette fix. Can we look at that test report, please? It's an ARC 50536. And I'll just show you this document and see whether you're familiar with it. You can see that it's a reaction to fire test report, number RA05305B, according to European standards E13823 and NF ISO 1195 Part 2. We call this test 5B. And it says at the very top, K7 system, and then there's an exclamation mark in a triangle, not classified because the test had to be interrupted. If we look at the the document on its face, just the first page of it, I think probably do for this purpose. Is this a document you've ever seen before?
I must have come across it. I suppose I can't remember.
Right. Let's look at page 3. You can see that it's dated, or rather bears the date of test of the 2nd of December 2004, and a little bit lower down it refers to the commercial brand as Renebond 55 PE cassette system. You see that?
Yes.
At the bottom of the page, we can see right at the bottom that there's a date, 7th of January 2005, signed by the CSTB there. And if we go to page 7, we can look at the results for specimen 1, and there was only one specimen, and there are the results set out for the product Renebond 55 PE. You've got the figure, the THR, and the SMOGRA figure set out across the page. And then under comments, if you look at the bold text at the very end of that little block of text, it says, the tests were stopped after 850 seconds. The results are not usable, but give an idea of the fire behavior of the product. Now, there's no evidence that we've seen in the documents, Mr. Gregorian, that the BBA ever received this document. To the best of your recollection, is that correct?
I certainly can't remember seeing this document.
Do you remember whether Arconic ever told you that they'd done a European test under EN 13501 on the cassette variant of Renebond PE?
I can't remember that either, no.
Did you ever discuss with Claude Verla any tests at all done on cassette fixed Renebond?
No, I don't think so.
Do we take it from that you were simply not aware of the fire performance tests on Renebond that were done on cassette?
Again, I can't remember whatever information was lacking. So I'm guessing, again, because it was not entirely relevant to our assessment, I'm guessing we didn't ask for it.
Right. Now, just to go back to a point we've been looking at earlier, you had on the file in 2006 the 2 Avi Technique reports from the CSTB, one for rivet and one for cassette. You remember looking at those this morning with me. So you knew that there were 2 different kinds of test, or rather 2 different kinds of fabrication, so far as the CSTB was concerned, yes? Rivet and cassette.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, and you knew that there was a CSTB classification for rivet for fire. Did you notice, regardless of whether it was relevant, did you notice that there wasn't one that you had for cassette, whether in PE or in FR? From memory, I might have considered this, but as I say, because we were assessing the panel, not the with the exclusion of the fixing system, we didn't chase for anything else. We just used whatever CSTB had provided. Let me try it this way. Did you ever have a conversation with Mr. Verle along the lines of, well, look, Claude, we've got your CSTB reports, Avi Technique for rivet and cassette, but we've only got rivet tests for fire. Do you have any cassette tests for fire? Did you ever have a conversation along those lines? No, I can't remember having such a conversation. But again, because it was irrelevant, I didn't feel the need to pursue that information. If the distinction between the two was irrelevant, as you tell us, did you wonder why there were 2 separate reports done by the CSTB under Avi Technique, one for cassette and one for rivet? You ask for information from CSTB and they provide whatever they have. So, yeah. Yes, I appreciate that. But did you ever ask yourself, well, I wonder why there are 2 separate reports, one for cassette and one for rivet, if the distinction between them, for your purposes, was irrelevant? Yes, I think, yes, that's what I assumed, because again, we were assessing the product, and
either of these reports would have been could have been used for our assessment.
When you say that's what I assumed, what did you assume?
Well, I assume whatever information that provided was sufficient for us to make an assessment.
Do I take it from that you, as a matter of fact, never asked Mr. Verley why you had received test data for the rivet fix, but no test data for the cassette fix?
That's correct. I didn't ask him for anything else.
And that's because you thought that there was the distinction between them was irrelevant, even though you had clear, separate CSTB AVI technique reports for cassette and rivet respectively.
That's correct. Yes.
Now, can we look at Brian Haynes's witness statement, please? That's BBA 3010784. And I'd like to go to page 11 in that document with you and look at paragraph 45, please, if we can. And you can see a question in bold from the inquiry at the top of the screen, top of page 11. The question goes as follows. What information on fire performance was Alcoa asked to provide to the BBA prior to the certification in 08/4510? Did you or anyone at the BBA ask Alcoa for all relevant test data in respect of Reynobond architectural wall panels? If not, why not? And the answer he gives is at paragraph 45. And he says this: from evidence on the file, Alcoa was asked by the product assessor to provide evidence for the reaction to fire performance for the standard panel, as was already available for the FR grade product. In making this request, BBA assumed that all relevant data would be supplied. Did you expect, this is my question to you, Mr. Gregorian, did you expect that when the BBA asked for evidence for the reaction to fire of PE panels, you would have expected Arconic to provide you all relevant data?
Yes, ideally that's what should have happened, but I think we made assessments with whatever data were available.
You say ideally that's what should have happened. Why was that an ideal? Why should it not have happened as a matter of course?
Well, there's the idea is to ask for information from the client, but you don't always get what you want. So, so we think of other ways of assessing the product. Sorry, you were reading this paragraph, but I can't see it on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, and I'm slightly surprised about that because it's still on my screen. Can you not see paragraph 11, or rather paragraph 45 and 46 of Mr. Haynes'?
Oh, yes, yes.
Would you like me to read it to you again?
Yes, if you would, yes.
Well, the answer to the question that you can see in bold is, from evidence on the file, Alcoa was asked by the product assessor to provide evidence for the reaction to fire performance for the standard panel, as was already available for the FR grade product. In making this request, BBA assumed that all relevant data would be supplied. That was what I was asking you about.
Yes. Yes, that's what we normally expect.
Yes,
the client to provide, but they provided whatever they had.
And would you therefore have expected all relevant data to have included the fire test data that I've just shown you in relation to the cassette version in early 2005, namely test B, 5B?
So I can't answer that question, to be honest.
Well, let me try it this way. If Arconic was sitting on test 5B and the BBA was assuming that all relevant test data would be supplied, do I take it that the BBA would assume that test 5B would be supplied?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Did the fact that Mr. Verley had not provided you with a classification report for PE cassette fix, nor indeed any test data for PE cassette fix, ring any alarm bells with you?
No, again, back to my statement before, it was just a panel we were considering, and the fixing method was considered irrelevant. And I must have discussed it with Brian at some stage, and we were assessing the panel accordingly.
Were you proceeding, when you say that the distinction between rivet and cassette was irrelevant, were you proceeding on the assumption that in those two different fixing systems, there would be no difference to the fire performance of the product?
That's correct.
What was the basis of that assumption?
Again, with my limited knowledge of fire issues, I must have discussed it with Brian. And I must admit, I agreed with the conclusion that we could assess the panel on its own, and the fixing method would be irrelevant. I sort of concurred with Brian. I must have done.
My question really is, what was the basis, so far as you remember, of the assumption that in different fixing systems there would be no difference between them as to the fire performance of the product? What
was the basis?
What was the scientific basis?
This again, I can't comment on that because I don't know enough about fire issues. But I think it's logical to assume. I must have thought at that stage that you're testing a material, how it's fixed. I mean, whatever test you do is fixed to something.
Did anybody at the BBA ever rigorously verify that assumption or try to?
No, as far as I know, no.
Did anybody at the BBA at the time ever perceive that, in fact, in proceeding on that assumption, there was a great deal of risk?
No, as far as I know, no.
Were you aware, in general terms, at the time, of any understanding or belief in the UK construction industry, or perhaps the European construction industry, that rivet fix ACM would perform worse in fire tests than cassette fix?
I wasn't aware of that. I don't know.
Can we then look at Arconic's claims for class 0 for PE? It's a slightly different topic, but very much the same documents. Can we begin in the technical file, please, at page 83, BBA 408042, page 83. Now, this is a brochure from Reynobond, which is on the technical file. And I'll just wait for it to come up. There it is. It's called Discover New Perspectives. Just looking at the front page, is this a document you recall, do you think?
No, I can't remember, but it's quite normal for some promotional literature to be included in the technical dossier.
Right. Can we look at page 104? And I'm afraid this is going to have to be expanded considerably, but in the bottom right-hand corner of the document, you can see it has 11/05 GB. You just see that in vertical print. Can you see that? Version 11/05 GB.
Yes.
And we've taken that to mean November 2005. Do you remember looking at this document on the technical file when you were preparing this certificate?
No, I can't remember.
Would it be typical for you, or to your knowledge, anybody else at the BBA, to review this sort of literature as part of the assessment of a certificate?
No, we wouldn't review every single document that was supplied.
No, but would you typically review this kind of literature? Would you use it as part of your assessment?
No, I don't think so.
Now let's just look at it, page 101. And see how far we go. At that page, you can see that there is a list of fire certificates. And at the fourth line down, if we could have that expanded, you can see that there is a block of 4 UK entries there. Can you see that?
Yes.
The first two relate to PE, and the second two relate to FR. And if we track across, we can see Warrington Fire documents 132316 and 132317 for FR. And those are the reports from 2003, which I think we looked at before. If we go up a little bit to the PE results above, we can see that Arconic are saying in this document that the PE called ACM has a class 0 rating. Yes?
Yeah.
And you track across, you can see that to support that, the Warrington Fire documents 70707 and 70708 are referred to. Now, I've shown you that because it's on your file. Were you aware at the time of Arconic's claim that ACM Renebon 55 with a PE call had class 0?
Sorry, the question is?
Were you aware at the time you were preparing the certificate that Arconic claimed in its product literature, and this is an example of it, on your file, that Renebon 55 in PE had class 0?
Again, not being familiar with the details, I must have consulted a fire expert for this. I vaguely remember this document, but I haven't gone into detail at all.
All right, let me try it a different way. This is a document which we can see because we can read it, and it was on your file, by which Arconic claim that Renebon 55 in PE, in other words, the standard, had actually got class 0. My question is, were you aware at the time that Arconic had claimed and was claiming that PE called Renebon 55 was class 0?
I can't remember.
Now, we've got the documents referred to, certificate 70707 and 70708, and indeed a summary report. There's no evidence that we've seen that those certificates were actually ever sent to the BBA. Can you help with that? Do you think they ever were sent to the BBA?
I remember seeing some documents from Warrington, but I say I can't remember having seen this particular report at all.
Did you? And I think the answer is no. But do I take it from your evidence so far that you didn't notice that this brochure indicated that there might be more documents relevant to UK national classification that you didn't have?
The Warrington report, I think we had, and I think we, for all I know, the fire expert would have consulted these particular documents for their assessment.
Yes, the FR you would have had, but the PE Warrington documents, the two 70707 and 70708, we can't see that you did have. My question is, did you notice that this brochure was saying that those documents existed, but you didn't have the reports?
No, I didn't notice, no.
Did you have any document in your possession which showed that Renebon 55 in PE had actually been tested under BS 476, parts 6 and 7, and achieved a class 0 classification?
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Did you have any documents in your possession which showed that Renebon 55 in PE had undergone the BSI test at 476 and had achieved a class 0 classification?
No, I don't know. I just...
Did you know, and I can take this shortly, I think, did you know that in fact, these certificates 70707 and 70708 related to a product called Renebon RB 160 PE, not Renebon 55?
I can't remember the details. I can't remember at all.
Taking it from me that those two sets of tests, 70707 and 70708, were dated 9th of May 1997. Take that from me. Would you be surprised to see that classification still being referred to in a brochure 7 years later, or 8 years later?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Was there any, well, let me try it a different way. Did you have any rule of thumb or policy perhaps within the BBA about how old test data could be to form the basis of a certificate?
I'm not aware of such a thing, but I'm guessing any test data which might be used to some extent to assess fire performance would have been useful. But I believe there is a time limit, but I have no idea as to what that time limit is.
Very well. Can we then turn to the certificate again, the BBA certificate, BBA 6047, and look at section 6.3 on page 5. BBA 6047, page 5. And if we just blow that up, please. I just want to see, we've been through quite a lot of material and it's quite technical and it's a long time ago. So let me try and help you by summarizing where I think we've got to so far, Mr. Gregorian. At this stage, we've covered 3 things. So do you agree then, first, that the BBA had a European classification for rivet fixed PE core ACM in grey-green, showing it to be class B? You've nodded, that's a yes.
Sorry, which paragraph are you?
Well, just looking at 6.1 and 6.2, okay, yeah. Summarizing what they tell us and what we've been through. First of all, you've been sent a European classification report for rivet fixed PE cord ACM in a grey-green color, saying it's class B. Yes, class B S2D0.
Yeah.
Secondly, you've had a European classification for rivet fixed FR core in gold, also class B, 2006.
Yes, I'm not sure where you're reading the rivet.
I'm just summarizing where we've got to. Shall I do this again? Let's start again. We've seen 3 separate classification reports or test reports. We've seen, first of all, the test 5A from 2005, which is a European classification for rivet fixed PR PE core with in a grey-green color, showing it to be class B S2D0. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. We've also seen a European classification for rivet fixed FR in a gold color, also class B. It's class B S1D0.
Yeah.
Yes. And both of those are referred to in 6.1. And we've also got, looking at 6.2, a set of results from September 2003 under BS 476, achieving UK national class 0 for FR core in a metallic grey. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's in a nutshell what 6.1 and 6.2 are referring to. Can we now look at 6.3? And I want to look at this very carefully with you. In 6.3, it says, as a consequence of sections 6.1 and 6.2, the products may be regarded as having a class 0 surface in relation to the approved document B of the Building Regulations 2000 as amended England and Wales. And I don't need to go on. If we skip to page 1 of the certificate, which I said I'd come back to, let's go to it now. And look under key factors assessed there, 3rd item down, behavior in relation to fire. It says, in relation to the building regulations for reaction to fire, the panels may be regarded as having a class 0 surface in England and Wales. Now, I want to examine with you the statement, the words that the panels may be regarded as having a class naught surface in both of those parts. My first question to you is, what do those words mean? The words, the panels may be regarded as having a class naught surface.
I think, again, I've got to emphasize that this is a wording that Brian looked at and approved. So, but generally the impression I get is maybe means they are. It's not possibly. They can be regarded as a low risk material. That's how I would read it.
Well, how did you understand it at the time?
Yes, I think that's always the impression I get when they say maybe. It means they can be classed as a material with low risk.
Did you write that statement? Did you draft the words may be regarded as having a class naught surface?
Again, this is a fairly standard sort of statement, but I must have discussed it with Brian, who would have approved the statement. I have no knowledge of what is low risk, what is incombustible or whatever. So I'm sure I would have okayed this particular statement by discussing it with Brian.
Was this you say that this was a fairly standard sort of statement? Is this a wording may be regarded as having a class naught surface, a phrase you took from somewhere else?
Yes, there's a good chance there was a similar product which I've actually included, but again, it's something that they not only for fire, but all the other sections who would look at it, they would edit as appropriate. The draft certificate isn't final. There are so many different sort of drafts. Eventually, we get to the correct answer.
When you chose the words you used here in the initial draft, why didn't you simply say the panels have a class naught surface?
I think the class naught, it is quite clear that it has a class naught, but all this is saying is that it can be regarded as a low risk material. And as to the logic behind that, I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know. I don't know why a class naught surface is called a low risk material. No idea.
Is there any reason why you chose to use the words the panels may be regarded as having a class naught surface, as opposed to using the words the panels have a class naught surface?
I think, but because of the assessment we were carrying out, bearing in mind the front face was different to the back face of the panel. Eventually, we came. Well, I'm sure the fire expert would have come to the conclusion that, irrespective of the differences between the two faces, it can still be regarded as a class naught surface. As to what bearing in mind it's a composite material, it's even probably more complicated than getting a homogeneous material to assess. So this is the conclusion. Despite all the various tests and so on, the conclusion was it may be regarded as a class naught surface. I mean,
let's go back to page 5 and look at the use of the expression in that part of the certificate. You say in 6.3, as I've shown you, as a consequence of sections 6.1 and 6.2, the products may be regarded as having a class naught surface. What was it about sections 6.1 and 6.2 that led to the consequence that the products may be regarded as having a class 0 surface?
Again, I have no knowledge of how the conclusions were drawn. All I know is that there are two or three different samples which were tested, and the conclusion has been stated in 6.3.
Was it not clear to you at the time that although FR had indeed passed BS 476 tests and achieved class 0, PE had not?
I can't comment on that. I can't remember the details.
You refer in an earlier answer to there being expert input on this, and you say Brian Haynes looked at and approved this wording. Did Brian Haynes himself obtain any expert guidance from outside the BBA on that wording we're looking at?
Yes, I believe. I think Sarah Colwell was the only consultant he actually communicated with. Whether he had, Brian Haynes was always in touch with BRE with regard to fire. So if it had been discussed in my absence, I wouldn't know.
Did Brian Haynes, to your knowledge, take notes of his discussions with the BRE on these occasions he was in touch with them?
No. He had his own office as technical manager, but he was constantly in communication with BRE, as far as I know.
And as far as you know, did he make notes of those constant communications? Did he record the advice that was given on each occasion?
No. With regard to this particular product, or generally?
Let's start with this particular product.
No. The only conversation I seem to remember is with Sarah Colwell with regard to the fire assessment of this product.
Just a moment. In general terms, then was it Brian Haynes's practice, to your knowledge, was it Brian Haynes's practice not to take notes of advice given to him by external fire experts such as Sarah Colwell?
No, he wouldn't. No.
So how can you tell us how that advice would then be recorded within the BRE, other than in Brian Haynes's own memory? Or perhaps it wouldn't be.
As far as I know, there were no written records of the. I mean, obviously, I didn't get a response from BRE, so I asked Brian to look into it.
Was there ever a time in your time at the BRE when external fire expertise advice of this nature, coming from Sarah Colwell or perhaps other experts, was required to be formalized, memorialized in writing?
That is the general. That's the general method. We always insist on written. When you write an email to a consultant, you expect a result. But in this case, it was rather unusual not to have a response, and that's why I talked to Brian. That's why I remember some of the details, because it was unusual in that respect. Right.
Well, let's pursue this a bit more. Can we go to technical file page 505, please? That's BBA 408042, page 505. And we can go to the bottom of the page. We can see an email to Sarah Colwell from you on the 29th of November 2007, copy to Brian Haynes, subject reaction to fire rain screen cladding. And we need to go over to page 507 to see the rest of it. And it says, "Dear Sarah, we are currently assessing a composite panel comprising 2 aluminium sheets bonded to a polyethylene core for use in back ventilated and drained rain screen cladding systems. The panel is coated on both faces with a 6 micron thick polyester primer. The exposed face is additionally protected by a 30 micron thick Duragloss or PVDF coating. Based on testing and classification to EN 13501 Part 1 and BS 476 Part 6 and 7, the exposed face has been assessed as having a Class 0 surface in relation to approved document B of the building regulations. As I'm sure you're aware, for buildings other than dwellings, the regulations also require classification of the surface facing the cavity, clause 12.9. No test data for the back face exists. However, as it has a much thinner coating and therefore less energy content than the exposed face, we think it is not unreasonable to assume a Class 0 rating for the back face too. This has indeed been demonstrated by tests on similar products in the past. Now, first, do you accept as a matter of fact that the PE standard of Reynabond 55 had not been tested under BS 476 and did not have Class 0, only FR did?
Sorry, your question again, please.
Well, looking 5 lines down, you say, based on testing and classification to EN 13501 Part 1 and BS 476 Part 6 and 7, the exposed face has been assessed as having a Class 0 surface in relation to approved document B. Do you accept that that applied, that BS 476, 6 and 7 only applied to the FR version of Reynabond 55 and not the PE version?
Again, I can't remember the details, but I'm guessing that that was the case.
Yes. I mean, you'd not seen at the time you wrote this email any test data under BS 476 Part 6 and 7, which related to the PE core, only the FR core.
We do say something about the PE version in the certificate, don't we?
Can you just answer my question? I'll try it once more. Do you accept that as a matter of fact, you didn't have any test data under BS 476 Part 6 and 7 relating to the PE core version of Reynabond 55, only the FR?
Yes, I would accept.
So when you told Sarah Colwell that the exposed face had been assessed as having a Class 0 surface, that was true only in respect of FR. It wasn't true, was it, in respect of the PE, the standard?
That must have been the case. I can't remember. I mean,
why didn't you make that clear to Sarah Colwell at the time?
I think I must have. The intention here is to assess a particular panel with the particular coatings. Now, I'm not sure if this material was fire retardant type or the PE type. All I'm asking in this email is if you could have a look as to how we can assess this and provide appropriate statement in the certificate. That's all.
Well, I'm just trying to understand how you come to make the statement to Sarah Colwell that you do in the sentence we're examining. First of all, do you accept that when you tell her that the exposed face has been assessed as having a Class 0 surface, that was true only in respect of the FR, but not true in respect of the standard?
The FR or the standard version would have been defined by the PVDF coating or any other coating. I mean, the intention is to see with this particular coating what would be her assessment. I would have no knowledge of what a fire retardant version was, what a PE version was. Basically, this is the information we had, and as far as I remember, I let Sarah have the necessary information to make an assessment.
When you said based on testing and classification to EN 13501, which is the European standard, did you think that classification of rivet PE as Class B, as we've seen, contributed in some way to the product's claim to have class naught?
Again, the fixing method was considered irrelevant here.
Well, let's look and see what Brian Haynes says about this. Can we go to his witness statement, please? At page 6, paragraph 28. And he's talking about the European tests. I'll wait for it to come up on the screen. BBA 3010784. Thank you. Page 6, paragraph 28, 4 lines down. He says, and he's referring to the European standards, and in the 4th line in that paragraph, can you see, Mr. Gregorian? He says they were published as part of a much wider process of standards harmonization, and at the time of the assessment in question, they were not widely recognized by users in the UK. They could not be used to definitively establish class naught performance as defined in UK building regulations. However, they could be used to classify performance in relation to EN 13501, Part 1, Harmonized European Classification Standard, which was equally acceptable under Building Regulations Approved Document B. Now, can we look at page 12, please, of the same statement, paragraph 53, under question 16. The bottom of that page, Mr. Gregorian, you can see a lengthy question set out by the inquiry. Did the 2008 certificate for Reynobond architectural wall panels 08/4510 indicate that all such panels achieve national class naught? If not, why not? Please explain with particular reference to the contents of the certificate, including 1, key factors assessed on page 1, section 13.1 on page 8. This certificate relates only to the product stroke system that is named and described on the front page. And 3, section 6.2, the tests to national class provided to the BBA. And the answer he gives is over the page on page 13. And he says at paragraph 53, the certificate did not state that all panels achieved national class naught. The certificate makes clear that not all colours were covered, and it states that some products were tested and classified to EN 13501 Part 1. As stated above, the certificate goes on to state that the EN classified panels would be suitable in class naught situations. Now, looking at your understanding at the time, did you understand yourself that the European test results could not be used to establish the British standard class naught?
I never got involved in European standards, and especially with regard to fire. I have no knowledge of this at all.
Right. I mean, was it any part of your thinking that because PE had achieved a Class B in Rivet, it could be treated as if it had Class naught?
I can't comment on that. It's way outside my area of expertise.
Right. Did you realize, I think you told us earlier that you did look at diagram 40 of the of approved document B we looked at earlier on in your examination. Did you realize when you were drafting this part of the report that European Class B did not equate automatically with national class naught?
No, I've got no knowledge of that at all. All I knew that under approved document B, it was acceptable to have material of limited combustibility above 18 meters. That's all I know. As regards classifications as to what constitutes a material of low combustibility, I just wouldn't know.
Did you know that the tests for limited combustibility, whether under the European system or the British system, the BS system, were completely different tests from the tests of surface spread of flame and the other tests leading to class naught?
Again, I have no knowledge of this at all. I would have consulted the fire expert.
Why was it necessary to say anything at all about class naught for the purposes of the PE standard version of Reynobond?
Because I believe that was the requirement of the approved document. And they basically you need to have certain classifications to be able to make an assessment on the product.
But we saw diagram 40, and it said you could either use Class B or National Class Naught. Given that you had Class B for Rivet, why was it necessary to say anything at all about Class Naught?
I can't comment on that. I don't know. I can't remember. I mean,
did Arconic ask you to put Class Naught somewhere in this certificate?
They may have done, but we would definitely have checked the validity of that statement.
Why didn't you simply say that because the standard PE in Rivet had achieved Class B, it satisfied diagram 40 for use above 18 meters?
I can't comment on that. I wouldn't know.
Can you see how somebody reading the certificate might have been misled into thinking that standard PE either had Class Naught, which it didn't, or could be regarded as having Class Naught, but on a basis which you can't understand or explain?
The certificate obviously has come to the conclusion, or the fire expert, with the approval of Brian Haynes, they must have come to the conclusion that they can be regarded as Class Naught. But also the certificate refers to the appropriate section for amplification on this.
Now, we'll come back to Sarah Colwell's response to the email I've shown you after the break, which I'm going to ask the chairman to give us in a second. Can I just ask you one question before we do? And that is, do you remember whether the wording may be regarded as having a Class Naught classification came from Sarah Colwell?
There's a good chance Brian Haynes would have initiated this. And obviously they must have discussed the issue between themselves and agreed that this is an appropriate statement.
I think you're speculating. You say there's a good chance, but from your own record, doing the best you can, and I know after 11 years, or longer actually, 13 years, it's difficult. But do you remember whether that phraseology was either specifically suggested by Sarah Colwell or actually approved by Sarah Colwell herself?
I can't make a comment on that. I don't know. I really don't know.
Very well. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Gregorian, we're going to have a short break at this point. We'll come back to resume at 25 to 4, please. And in the meantime, please make sure not to talk about your evidence to anyone else, all right?
Okay, thank you.
See you a bit later on.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Good.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. I apologize for the slight delay, but we are now ready to continue. So I'll just check that Mr. Gregorian is there and can hear me and see me.
Yes,
And very good, Mr. Gregorian. And you're, I hope, ready to carry on, are you?
I am, yes.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'll invite Mr. Millett to put some more questions to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can we go back to the BBA certificate, please, at BA 6047, page 5? And I'd like to look at section 6.3. BBA 6047, page 5. And if you look at 6.3, in the last sentence there, it says the unexposed side of the product may also be regarded as having a class 0 surface. I want to look to see with you what supported that statement. Can we start by looking at the technical file, please? BBA 408042 at page 535. This is an email from you to Claude Verlet on the 22nd of October, if we look at the second half of the email run on the screen. And you say, "Dear Claude, a copy of our proposed draft certificate is attached." And then you say in the third paragraph, with regard to reaction to fire, in accordance with the requirements of the UK building regulations, we also need classification of the reverse, unexposed side of the panel. In section 6.3, we have assumed and stated that the unexposed side of the products may also be regarded as having a class 0 surface. However, we will still need documentary evidence showing that this is indeed the case. The Warrington test report makes no specific reference to the performance of the reverse side. Is it right that you understood that Arconic had to provide separate documentation showing the performance of the reverse side of the panel?
Ideally, yes, of the particular product we were covering.
And in the paragraph there, you refer to the Warrington test report. Was that the 2003 Warrington test report that we've seen on FR?
I can't remember.
Now, if we go to page 499, we can see the response. 499, same technical file. This is his email of the 5th of December 2007, and he says, "Hello, Hamo. After having checked with our paint laboratory and the different certification we have today, I give you those two information in order to qualify the back face of our Reynobond panels. One, the only difference between front and back side is the thickness of the coating, which is 6 microns instead of 35 microns. So we have a 14.2 grams per square meter coating weight on the back face for 47.2 grams per square meter on the front side. Two, like you can see in the attached reaction to fire classification report number RA070182, our coated aluminium used for the skins of Reynobond are classified as A1 non-combustible. Can you please now let me know if you have all the required information to close our certification process?" And you can see that there's an attachment to this email at the top there, Reynolux A1 RA070182. Can we go to that? That's on the technical file and a different part of it, page 139. And as one might expect, given the title in the attachment, it relates to Reynolux. Can you see that in the middle of the page there?
Yes.
That's a totally different product from Reynobond 55, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Can you explain how a classification for a completely different product could be acceptable as the basis for a claim for class 0 on the backside of Reynobond 55?
Again, I've got to emphasize that I have very little knowledge of fire issues, but I would imagine the substrate on which the paint has been applied, being metal, that wouldn't catch fire. So the only fire issue would have been the actual coating, which in this case was much less than the front face coating. I think 6 micron against 35 microns, I seem to remember.
But you're being asked to extrapolate, are you, from the results on Reynolux to a thicker surface on Reynobond?
I wasn't involved in decisions regarding that. So that's why I consulted fire experts for that. And
Now,
to be honest, I find it quite logical to assume that is the case. But again, I had to have confirmation from a fire expert.
You say we had to have confirmation from a fire expert. Indeed, we've seen your email to Sarah Colwell of the 29th of November 2007, at least in part. Can we go back to that? That's in the technical file at page 507, BBA 408042 at page 507. We've looked at half of this. Let's look at the rest of it. I was showing you this before the break. And you say just below halfway down, no test data for the back face exists. However, as it has a much thinner coating and therefore less energy content than the exposed face, we think it's not unreasonable to assume a class 0 rating for the back face too. This has indeed been demonstrated by tests on similar products in the past. Could you please comment on the validity of our assumption? And if we see page 505, her response, it's in the second email from the top on that page, also dated the 29th of November. And she says, Hamo, we would need to see the test data to be able to make any meaningful comment on the potential product performance. If you would like us to complete a review, we would be happy to look at this for you and provide a proposal if necessary for any additional work or formal assessment. And your response to that is a little bit above it, still on page 505. We can just scroll up, please. You say, Sarah, I was not able to contact you by telephone, hence email. The attached documents are classification reports for the standard and fire retardant versions. Testing to BS 476 part 6 and 7 has also been undertaken, but only hard copies of the reports exist. Please let me know if this is sufficient for your purposes. If you need to have a chat, please give me a call when you're free. I'm not in this afternoon, but I am in the office until 12 noon and the rest of the week. Do you remember whether you actually had the chat to which you refer?
With Sarah?
Yes, with Sarah Colwell.
No, I couldn't get hold of her.
Having been told by Warrington that the only solution was to get tests done, why did you approach Sarah Colwell?
To see whether our assumption was correct. Bearing in mind, I must have discussed it with Brian regarding this, and we were seeking confirmation from Sarah.
Right. Now, we've got no evidence on the file that we've seen that Sarah Colwell ever responded to you, or indeed to Brian Haynes. Did she, do you think, in response to this request?
As far as I remember, there was no response from her because of her busy work schedule. So that's why I contacted Brian to have a chat with her.
Now, we can see from this email before we leave it that you sent her, can you look at the attachment line? You can see you sent her the 2 European tests for Rainabond 55. First of all, the test for PE, which had a Euro class BS2D0. That was classification 5A we looked at earlier. And also Rainabond FR BS1D0, which was the 2006 test.
Yeah.
You didn't send her the 2003 BS476 part 6 and 7 tests that had been done by Warrington Fire for FR, did you?
Where I say only hard copy exists.
That's what you're referring to, is it?
Yes, yes.
Why didn't you send those?
As I say, I was expecting a response, and I didn't receive a written response. But based on, I think, based on the actual specification that was supplied by Arconic, Alcoa, I'm guessing she was able to assess the fire performance of the back face based on what she had.
Can we go to, sorry, I'm so sorry. I keep thinking you finished your answer. Can we go to your statement, please, at page 4? And you can see inquiry question 6 in bold. You say, what information on fire performance was Alcoa asked to provide to the BBA prior to the certification in 084510? Did you or anyone at the BBA ask Alcoa for all relevant test data in respect of relevant architectural wall panels? If not, why not? And you answer at paragraph 22. Can you see? You say, from the correspondence available and to the best of my recollection, Alcoa provided information relating to the front face of the panels, which had a PVDF coating of thickness 35 microns. The back face of the panels had a polyester primer coating of 6 microns. On the advice of BRE's fire expert, our technical manager accepted that in fire, the back face of the panels would perform at least as well as the front face. And as I think we've seen in your statement already at paragraph 39, you say that it was Brian Haynes who sought the advice of Sarah Colwell. Are you able to shed any further light on when that advice was given?
When, sorry?
On when that advice was given. Are you able to tell us when that advice was given?
What advice is that? Sorry.
The advice that we see in the last sentence of your paragraph 22. On advice of BRE's fire expert, our technical manager accepted that in fire, the back face of the panels would perform at least as well as the front face.
Yeah, this is the conversation I was referring to. The telephone conversation with Sarah.
I see. So that's the conversation that Brian Haynes had with Sarah Colwell that you listened in on but couldn't hear what she said.
That's correct. Again, I don't know what Sarah said. There was a short conversation between Brian and Sarah. And I sort of got the approval from Brian soon afterwards.
And when Brian Haynes reported to you what Sarah Colwell had told him, is the totality, all of the advice that he got from her reflected in that last sentence in paragraph 22?
Yes, I would imagine that was the conclusion that Brian came to based on the advice given by Sarah.
Did Sarah Colwell, to the best of your knowledge, or explain to Brian Haynes, or did Brian Haynes tell you why it was technically acceptable to use the Reynolux classification to draw any conclusions about the fire performance of the back face of Renault?
No, there was no explanation, but I think we both agreed that it's a reasonable assessment because there's less paint, so there's better fire performance with regard to the back face.
That's a process of extrapolation, isn't it? Was there any technical basis that you knew of which would permit extrapolation from the results of the test on one product to another product?
No, I mean, because I wasn't sure about this extrapolation, we sought confirmation from BRE.
I'd like to turn back to the certificate, please, to look now at section 6.4 on colour. If we go back, please, to BBA 6047, page 5. It says there, let's have that blown up if we can. Paragraph 6.4, these performances may not be achieved by other colours of the product, and the designations of a particular colour should be confirmed by, and then you set out some tests there. Now, do we understand from your witness statement that coverage of the BBA certificate was limited to the colours expressly set out in the certificate? So grey, green, metallic grey, and gold for the particular types of panel.
That's correct.
And is it right that the particular colours are valid, in other words, covered by the certificate, only if they are on the stated core types? So grey-green only certified if it's on PE called Renault bond?
That's correct, yes.
Was it your understanding that particular colours are only valid for particular coatings? So the certificate would only cover metallic grey Duragloss finish when applied to PE called Renault bond?
That's correct, yes.
And is it right, therefore, that you intended that the reader should understand that every other color and every other combination outside what we've discussed had to be tested?
That's correct.
What was the technical justification for that color limitation?
From my conversation with Brian, the impression I got was fire performance is very much a function of the actual color. It's very sensitive to the actual color. As to why that is, I wouldn't know. Possibly something to do with the energy contained within the paint coating. I don't know.
Did BBA...
Sorry.
Did you want to finish your answer?
No, I'm okay.
You were about to say something else, and I started the next question. All right, I'll ask the next question. Did the BBA expect that that color limitation would be rigorously adhered to by customers?
The certificate covers that product and that product only with that particular coating. As to how the certificate is used, that's really beyond our control, really.
Did the BBA ever hear that this color restriction in the certificate was routinely ignored in the UK market?
I cannot comment on that. I don't know.
So you never heard any intelligence or rumors that UK customers were ignoring this color restriction?
No.
Did you ever hear that customers couldn't understand why the difference in color would make a difference?
I can't comment on that. I mean, it's a fact that we were aware of, but as far as the certificate is concerned, it covers this particular product. If the client or the installer wants to put a different product in his cladding system, that would be out of our control. It wouldn't be covered by the certificate. That's what we are saying here.
Can you explain why the certificate doesn't say on its front page that it certifies Reynobond cladding wall panels in these three colors, in these three forms?
Yes.
Nothing else.
That's it.
But why doesn't it say that on the front page?
This is just the standard format of the certificate. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why not. But specifically, those statements are relevant to the behavior in relation to fire. So it seems logical to me that it would be in the fire section.
I follow. Can we go to page 471 of the technical file? At the bottom of page 471, a technical file BBA 408042, at the bottom of page 471, we see an email from Claude Verlet to you on the 12th of December 2007. Subject Reynobond certification. Hello, Hamo, sorry to disturb, but coming back to our call from yesterday, could I have an official document from the BBA that certify that we have the BBA approval for Reynobond in PVDF finish and in Duragloss 5000 finish? And you respond to him a little bit further up the screen, if we can, same page. Same day, you say, Claude, as requested, please find attached letter, hard copy to follow, I hope it proves helpful. And you can see that the attachment is an approved letter in PDF. We can see that on page 473. We go two pages down. And it's a letter signed by Brian Haynes addressed to Claude Verlet at Arconic, dated the 12th of December 2007. It's entitled Reynobond Architecture Wall Cladding Panels with Duragloss 5000 or PVDF coating. And he says, I'm writing to confirm that all technical work relating to the assessment of the above product has now been successfully completed. The certificate is currently being finalized for issue and will be forwarded to you in due course. We hope this letter is helpful in the meantime. Do you know whether this letter was intended for Claude Verlet to use officially, perhaps to send out to clients?
No, as far as I know, they couldn't use this. They shouldn't use this as proof of technical approval by the BBA. They would have to wait until the certificate was formally issued.
Now we can see that
whether they had used this in a particular project or not, I just wouldn't know. I don't think BBA generally would know about these things. But all we are saying here, bearing in mind the client is anxious to get his approval, this is a fairly standard sort of letter which Brian Haynes has signed, obviously, here. Just to reassure the client as to what stage the assessment is, just to keep him happy, really.
You can see there's no mention of particular colors being certified here, or of core types or finishes. My question is, if colors and core types was such an important scope limitation, why was that not spelt out by Mr. Haynes in his letter?
I don't know. I wouldn't know. I mean, I say the certificate mentions in the appropriate section what is covered, especially with regard to fire. Otherwise, the title here would have been much longer than it is now.
Can we go back to the certificate, please, at page 3, BBA 6047, page 3. And I'd like to look at section 1.1 or paragraph 1.1 with you again, page 3. Just blow that up. And it says, we've read this a number of times, but you can see in the middle, it says at the end of the line, a Duragloss or PVDF coating available in various colors protects the exposed face. Do you refer there to various colors? Do you recall that, in fact, it was Claude Verlet who had proposed that wording and you'd added it without any objection? We saw that from the red and green email run. Do you remember that?
Yes, I would guess this was how CSTB document was worded.
Well, we see what Claude Verlet intended by these words, that you had agreed to add at his suggestion, as we saw from the red and green email earlier. Can we go to his witness statement at page 12? It's MET 53190, page 12, paragraph 42. It's a long paragraph, so we need to pick it up about halfway down. It's on the screen in front of you about 3/4 of the way down, and it says, if the certificate, do you see? If the certificate
states coloris.
Exactly. If the certificate states coloris divers, that's French, I think, color various, the testing may relate to all colors in the range, or if a specific color is stated on the certificate, it will only relate to that. If customers had any concerns, it would be expected that they would contact the company so that the issue could be discussed. My question, Mr. Gregorian, for you is, did you understand that Mr. Verlet wanted the certificate to relate to all the colors in the range, or only to the colors specifically stated?
He may have ideally wanted that, to cover all colors, but I don't think we would accept that. So that's why we have clearly stated in the certificate as to what colors were covered.
Do you accept that the reader might understand from section 1.1 that we've just been looking at on page 3 of the certificate that all colours in the range were covered by the certificate, either with a Duragloss or a PVDF coating?
I'm not sure, but I haven't got the statement in front of me. Can we have this on the screen?
Of course. It's BBA 6047 at page 3. We can see it again there. It says, as I've shown you, it says in the fourth line, a Duragloss or PVDF coating available in various colours protects the exposed face. My question is, do you accept that a reader of that might understand that all colours in the range are covered by this certificate?
No, I think we have made that clear. I think obviously that is true. They have these systems, these different panels with different coatings and so on. But they wouldn't be covered because we have made that clear in the appropriate section as to what is covered. And the only ones we have covered, obviously, if again we say if a different color is involved, obviously they would have to go back to the certificate holder for confirmation as regards fire performance.
Do you accept that by adding what Mr. Vele had asked you to, namely the reference to various colors there, you are introducing an ambiguity in the certificate? On the one hand, between saying that various colors were covered, but on the other, only the colors specifically identified were covered.
The fact that there's a statement here as regards the different products that were on offer by Alcoa doesn't necessarily mean that it's covered. It merely states what the manufacturer can provide. That's the best way I can explain.
Can we then look on and see how the draft was circulated? We've seen from Mr. Haynes's evidence and from discussions you and I have had earlier in the day, Mr. Gregorian, that this was a leader certificate, which meant that there was a review process. Can we go, please, to BBA 3010784, page 5. This is Mr. Haynes's witness statement. I want to show you paragraph 21. And at paragraph 21, Mr. Haynes says, leaders were submitted for comment to other BBA staff and to external experts. The experts to whom the draft was circulated would depend on the nature of the product. I exhibit document BH1 forming part of this statement, which sets out those parties to whom the draft of this certificate was sent, both internal and external, as follows. And then there's a long list of bullet points with names next to them. You can see that. And the first of which is the client and others down the list. The BBA section head was the second bullet point on that list. I think we established earlier was Jeff Gurney. Is that right? That's
correct.
Would this document also have gone to John Albon?
John would most probably have looked at the durability aspect because that's how he would get involved in things like this.
Right.
Most probably he would have at some stage been consulted with regard to durability.
Right. Was he on the panel, if I can put it that way, for review of leader certificates such as this?
Yes.
Which section was John Albon in at the time? Do you recall?
I think durability was his main area of activity. Can't remember what the section was called, to be honest. I think just durability.
And would I be right in thinking that Brian Haynes would have had the ultimate sign-off on the wording of the certificate?
Yep.
Yes, I see. Now, in this list here, we can see who is there, but we can't see anybody in this list from BRE or from Warrington who would have seen this draft in its final form and signed off statements about fire performance. Is that because nobody from the BRE or Warrington or any other fire expert external to BBA did so?
Yes, I'm not aware that. I mean, this was obviously a standard list of different parties that would have a look, and the BRE wasn't in it. So I wouldn't know about that.
Can we go to the technical file again, please, and look at page 319? This is a document which has the word draft 1 on the top. And you can see this looks like the very first draft of the BBA certificate. It hasn't even got a number on at that stage. But at the very top, somebody has written in manuscript, circulation. Does that tell us that this draft was circulated for commentary within the BBA?
Obviously, there would be some circulation because the section head each individual section head would have to look at this to assess the product from their own perspective. Circulation, as it's written here, it could very well mean the circulation to the various parties which Brian Haynes has actually drawn up.
How wide would the circulation of a draft 1's version of a certificate like this be?
Sorry, how long?
How wide would the circulation of draft 1 of a certificate such as this be?
Normally, the draft would go to various departments who would look at this and then pass on to the, it would just go between the various departments, various sections.
Would the circulation be narrower than the final list of people we saw in Brian Haynes' statement a minute ago?
I believe with confirmation certificates, there was less of a problem in this respect. But for normal certification, it would definitely go into a loop several times, many times, sometimes, before it was finalized.
Can we have this version side by side, please, with the issued version? I want to compare the front pages of each of them. If you keep draft 1 up on the screen, please, and let's have the final version as issued, which is BBA 6047. There it is. Let's just compare behavior in relation to fire. On the left-hand side in draft 1, you can see that it says, in relation, do you see where it says, in relation to the building regulations for reaction to fire, the panels may be regarded as having a class 1 surface in England and Wales. And then when you look across to the final version, it says the panels may be regarded as having a class 0 surface in England and Wales. Now, the technical file doesn't contain any record of any external commentator suggesting that change, or indeed when it might have been made. First of all, do you know when that change was made?
No, I can't comment on this. But bearing in mind the certificates actually is stamped on it for comment only, and there will be a lot of drafts, including things that would have to be finalized. And as I say, after consultation with BRE, it was decided that class 0 was the appropriate one. But as to when this happened, I just couldn't tell you.
Do you know who decided to make that change?
This must have been after discussion with Brian Haynes.
Do you know who did, was it his decision? Did he decide to make that change? From class 1 to class 0?
I believe so, yes. I believe, I certainly didn't make the decision.
Do you know on what basis, from your own knowledge, on what basis the change was made from class 1 to class 0?
Based on the advice from BRE.
Was the BRE asked to advise on what the classification of the panels should be?
I think the idea was to confirm that that the panels could be considered as class note. For all I know, Brian may have actually seen the class 1 classification and changed it to class note. I can't remember that.
Do you know when that advice was given by the BRE to change from class 1 to class 0?
Sorry, what was the question again? Sorry, I can't.
Do you know when the BRE gave the advice to change the classification on the certificate from class 1?
No, I wouldn't know. No, I wouldn't know.
Right, I've got one or two more topics to cover with you, Mr. Gregorian. The next one is surveillance. Are you aware, or were you familiar with the fact that the BBA terms and conditions required the certificate holder to allow the BBA to conduct surveillance?
The accepted arrangement within the UATC was the original certification body would conduct all surveillance, and they would be expected to inform the BBA if there were major non-conformances. Having said that, I think something I've probably missed in my witness statement, every 3 years we would go through each certificate to make sure there were any problems, and one of the questions we would ask CSTB was whether there were any non-conformances. And I think that process is still going on now. Every 3 years, we would review a certificate.
Can we go to the technical file, please? BBA 408042, page 121. This is a document headed Request for Surveillance Visit. At the bottom, you can see that it's dated the 21st of April 2008. We can have that on the screen. And there's a signature next to it, Project Manager. It looks like your signature.
Yes, it is, yes.
And the other signature is Head of Approvals, Brian Chamberlain, yes?
Yes.
And in the table, you can see details of locations to be visited. If we can just scroll back up, please. You can see details of locations to be visited and visit frequency. Location, Merksheim, visits per annum, 0. And at the bottom of that, there's a section, there's a note, and it says 1, unless technically justified, each location should receive at least 2 visits per annum. Please identify if the visit is to be combined with an existing visit arrangement. And then at the very bottom of the table, it says, if no surveillance required, provide reason. And then somebody's put surveillance by CSTB France. Did that mean that the BBA was going to rely on the CSTB to conduct the surveillance at Merksheim?
Yes, yes. As I say, within UEATC rules, the original certification body would, well, they were supposed to carry out any surveillance and inform. They were expected to inform the BBA if there were any major non-conformances. That was the accepted procedure within the UATC rules.
Can we then go, please, to page 123 of the technical file? Your email, bottom of the page, 17th of May 2007, to Laurent Pagnol. Dear Laurent, we're currently assessing the above product with a view to issuing an Agrément certificate. And you set out the applicant's details, and then you say, as part of our assessment, we would normally carry out a factory inspection against a quality plan. However, we understand that there is currently a scheme in operation by which regular surveillance by CSTB is carried out. In view of this, we should be grateful if you would kindly confirm that factory production control relating to the product has been satisfactorily maintained, and that once the certificate is issued, you will inform the BBA if A, there are any major non-compliances are identified, B, the factory visits are discontinued. Your prompt responses would be much appreciated. And above that, you could see that Laurent Plagnol responds on the 21st of May. Dear Hamo, I confirm you that any major non-compliances are identified. The factory audits are continued. The next audit will be scheduled the 14th of June 2007. Best regards, Laurent Plagnol. Is that, as we've seen from the emails there, the agreement to set up regular audits by the CSTB?
Yes, it's quite standard way of asking CSTB if everything is okay.
Was it your understanding or expectation, therefore, that the CSTB would conduct surveillance twice a year and report back to the BBA?
Yes, that within the UATC rules, we were perfectly entitled to assume that the CSTB would carry out surveillance.
There was no audit, was there? And certainly no evidence we've seen that there was.
No, that wasn't required.
So did the BBA have any quality plan with Arconic when it was originally assessing the Rainabond 55 product and issuing the certificate?
I can't remember, to be honest. I don't know.
So when you
when CSTB certificate is given to the BBA, all quality issues were the responsibility of the original issuing body, CSTB. So whether quality plan was not relevant here, I can't remember. But certainly there was no direct control by the BBA over the manufacture of the product.
Is the effect of this that when it came to issuing the certificate, you hadn't had any quality plan or surveillance report from the CSTB?
No, I don't remember having any such thing, because it wasn't the normal thing to do. I mean, obviously, there's nothing on file regarding the quality plan, but something like this email would probably be sufficient for our purposes.
Was the arrangement, therefore, that the CSTB would effectively report only major non-conformities and nothing else?
That's right.
Now, you were at the BBA for more than 2 years after January 2008, when the certificate for Rainabond 55 was issued. In that time, I think it's right, isn't it, that the BBA did not receive any surveillance reports?
That's correct, yes.
Did that surprise you?
No, whether they were expected to provide surveillance reports or not, I don't know. But as I say, after 3 years, in 2011, I believe there was a review, but I had left the BBA by then. And as I say, during the review, things like quality control issues would have been addressed.
Yes, thank you. I've just got one more short topic. Can we go, please, to META 402052? META 402052. I'd like to go to page 55 in that document. This is a letter from the BBA dated the 15th of January 2008 and sent to Claude Verla. If you go to page 2, you can see that it's signed by G.G. Lines, section head, technical writing and publications. We haven't heard anything about Mr. Lines so far in your evidence. What was his role at this time?
Jeff was the head of technical writing.
Right.
I've worked very closely with him.
Did he have any role to play in the technical drafting of the BBA certificate itself?
No, the originator of the draft certificate would be me, and then he would be in charge of circulating it to various departments, getting comments, including them, and eventually I would have a look at the draft certificate, and he had no input into the technical aspects. He would basically be in charge of the just producing the certificate.
If we go back to page 1, we can see the heading. You can see the certificate is referred to there. And in the first paragraph, he says, I'm pleased to inform you that Agrément certificate number 084510 first issue has been awarded to the above product, and a copy of the certificate bearing the number and our chief executive's signature is enclosed. And if we go to the next page, which I've just had on the screen, you can see that it was sent by Mr. Lyons. Would you have been aware of this letter at the time?
This is a standard letter which I must have seen several times.
I see.
This is towards the end of the, once the certificate is signed by the chief executive, that's the letter that would go to the client.
Under conditions there on that page, you can see that the letter says, we must draw your attention to the conditions of certification in the certificate and point out that if modifications are made to the specification or conditions of use of the certificated product during the period of validity of the agreement certificate, the BBA must be informed without delay. Failure to do so could invalidate the certificate. Was that standard wording?
Yes, I believe so.
So was it the position of the BBA that the certificate holder would have to tell the BBA if there were any modifications or if the conditions for use were different?
That's correct, yes.
Would you have expected that to have included changes to or updates in the fire classification of René 55?
I think it would apply to the certificate as a whole. Any material change would have had to be conveyed to the BBA.
If, for example, the European fire classification for PE rivet had been downgraded to an E, class E, or a class C, would you have expected that fact to have been communicated to the BBA?
That's what we are asking the client to do, and I'm not sure if that sort of scenario has happened before, but it's sort of that particular clause actually just confirms that any change from what we have assessed would have to be conveyed to BBA. I think that's a logical thing to do, isn't it?
Would you have expected Arconic to have told the BBA if it became aware that any of its statements in the certificate were incorrect, misleading, or required updating?
Arconic would have had to do that just to make sure that the certificate is valid for their product.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of my prepared questions.
Right.
And may I ask, therefore, that this be the time for the appropriate break. I'm sorry that it's just 1 minute before 4:30, but it would be convenient now to take the break, look at any further questions, and then release the witness, if possible.
Yes. Well, Mr. Gregorian, we need to have a short break at this stage so that Mr. Millett can check that he's asked you all the questions he needs to ask you, and also to enable others who are following the proceedings to consider whether they think there are other questions that need to be asked. So we'll have a short break until 4:45, please. And at that point, we'll see if there are any further questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
And as before, please, no talking to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it while you're out of the room, so to speak.
Sure.
All right. See you
Yeah.
later on. Thank you very much.
Thank-
Welcome back, everyone. We'll see now whether there are any further questions for Mr. Gregorian. You there, Mr. Gregorian? Can you see me and hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Good, thank you very much. Well, we'll find out now whether Mr. Millett has any more questions for you. Mr. Millett?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gregorian, I have two documents to put to you, if I may. Can the first one please be put? It's BBA 3010701 at page 1. So BBA 000100701. And this is an email which is sent by John Albon on the 20th of November 2007 to Brian Haynes, copied to you, and it follows on from the discussions on that day about comparing the front side and the back side and whether it's safe to conclude that the backside is class 0. That's the context. And if you look at the text of the email, it says, I would be amazed if the coating isn't class 0, but can't see what we are gaining by not asking them to prove it. It also seems unfair to the other certificate holders who haven't commissioned the necessary test. Could we compromise by proceeding to issue, but asking them to provide the confirmatory data retrospectively? In that email, first of all, did you understand the them there to be a reference to Arconic?
Yes, I suppose that's true, yes.
Do you know what happened to that question or proposal by John Albon, whether there was a request sent back to Arconic to ask them to provide the confirmatory data retrospectively?
I can't remember. I can't remember that at all, no.
Can we look at BBA 000100711, please? This is the email same day, which isn't part of the same email stream. But you write to Brian Haynes, copied to John Albon, and say, thanks, Brian, in response to a different document. And you say, I'll get Alcoa to have the test done. One less thing to do for the coil-coated sheet. Did you get Alcoa to have the test done, do you think?
I think in the correspondence we have seen before, we did ask for additional tests, test results. But in the end, because that wasn't forthcoming, we decided to go a different route with regard to assessment. Mainly the extraction idea which we used.
Why not simply insist that Arconic do the test as you had agreed that you would get them to do?
I can't remember the exact context in which this was agreed, but I think it was considered acceptable to use an extrapolation of some kind. Bearing in mind, Alcoa would want their certificate as soon as possible. We agreed that was a sort of reasonable decision to make.
Well, let me just pursue this a little bit more, if I may. You say, I'll get Alcoa to have the test done. Did you go back to Arconic, Alcoa,
yes,
Mr. Verley, and say, do the test, please?
Yes, I think that there was a correspondence which spelled out our requirements. But in the end, as I say, we decided that it was just adequate for us to do some sort of extrapolation.
Did Mr. Verley refuse to do the test?
again, it looks like they were reluctant to do a test.
Why did you allow them to get away with expressing reluctance to do a test? You told Mr. Haynes that you would get Alcoa to have the test done. Why didn't you insist?
As I say, after discussion with Brian, we decided an easier option, a cheaper option for the client. It was just appropriate just to use some kind of extrapolation based on advice given by BRE.
Well, do you remember whether Alcoa actually told you that they were not going to do the test despite your request?
No, I can't remember that, no.
Can you remember why you settled for an extrapolation rather than insisting that Alcoa do the test that you told Mr. Haynes you were going to get them to do?
I guess it must have been as a result of my discussion with Brian, whether we could go a different route.
Which is why I asked the question. Did Arconic refuse to do what you asked them?
I suppose so. It's not so much that they refused, but they had whatever test that was available. And as I say, we decided that was probably adequate for us to make an assessment.
Why did you? Right. Did you settle for an extrapolation rather than insisting that Arconic produce the test you'd asked for commercial reasons?
I think technically it was a sound decision. And as I say, I have very little knowledge of fire, as I've said before, but I think the impression I got with talking to Brian and so on was that it wasn't unreasonable to assess the product in this way. It wasn't just merely for commercial reasons. It was it's an easier and simpler method of doing this, and perfectly acceptable as far as I know.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Gregorian. Well, I have come to the end of my questions now, and it remains only for me to thank you very much for coming to the inquiry to give your evidence. We're most grateful to you. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I hope I've been of some help.
Well, you have indeed, Mr. Gregorian, and it's right that I should thank you on behalf of the panel for the time you've given us and for the evidence you've given us. We found it very useful, and we're very grateful to you for coming along to talk to us. So I think that's everything we need to ask you, and you're now free to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's the end of our proceedings for today. We'll resume at 10 o'clock on Monday of next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.